I want to introduce Ron Bianchi. For people that haven't been at any of the sessions that he's done over the last number of years for any of the Lake Ontario 300 or any of those, Ron is a very long-time friend of mine. We talked cruising many years ago together. Ron is a meteorologist by trade. He's taught at the Science Center, Science North. He was the VP of the Weather Network, and he trained the on-air meteorologists on there, or non-meteorologists, because a lot of them are meteorologists, including, I think he had something to do with Chris St. Clair, who's one of their I guess their key people on the weekend. Ron now works for Golder Associates and does companies that are looking for information on weather for their businesses, like wind farms and those types of things. Ron has helped our Canada Summer Games teams in the past with weather modeling, and just an exceptional speaker, one meteorologist that he can actually understand. And through the support of the province of Ontario, we've been able to bring Ron in through our Pan Am program, and we thought that this would be an opportunity to include athletes, coaches, officials, because weather is always a question that people have. And I'll turn it over to Ron. And Ron, I appreciate your coming.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Take care.
Going upstairs?
Yeah.
You're not going to watch?
I have to go back. We are videotaping.
Oh, okay.
So that will be on YouTube.
Clean up the language then.
Yes.
You know, when I do these talks, you got to kind of judge what your audience is. Maybe a broad spectrum or a very narrow one. So I kind of, when I put this together last couple days, I kind of grabbed pieces of different topics that I covered in meteorology. But when it comes down to it, is understanding some wind theory, how it generates, how it gets blowing out there, what are the trap falls of some of the wind effects that we kind of end up on the race course, and how to handle it. And then we'll talk about there's a whole bunch of stuff of grid data. Does everybody know what grid data is? Please tell me. Grid data, G-R-I-B. One person.
No.
Two. Thank you. Thank you. You know, every time I do this, it's amazing how people don't know what's out there still. And with all the Twitter going on about everything, I guess Rob Ford's taking up all the bandwidth. Sure. There's a lot of stuff out there for the average and competitive sailor. A lot of stuff. And get this, most of it's free. So, because nobody wants to spend money on stuff. They'd rather buy a new sail or a new rudder, whatever. So we're going to talk a bit about that and some of the pitfalls, understanding grid, and what software you need to view grid data. Do you ever use it on a regular basis?
Yeah, I do boat delivery, so we're always looking at weather windows, and that's how we get our data.
And do you find it useful?
Yeah, super useful. Usually it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, and we'll talk about why it's so accurate. All right, so we're going to cover a bit about wind strategy when it comes to racing. Basically understanding some of the basic principle of how wind is generated on various scales, because you have to look at it from a big picture and you zoom down to a smaller picture for where your race course is. And then trying to predict the behavior on the race course. That's what we try to train a lot of people on. Getting the forecast as is from either May4 or Environment Canada, it's a good first start, but it's not the best. I think just like we treat navigation, tactics, rules, maybe it's a stretch here, but meteorology should be up there. I mean, there's been a ton of books on this. One of the best and worst books ever created for this. I want to date myself here. When I was a junior sailing instructor, Walker's book on Wednesday. Has anybody seen this thing?
Stuart Walker's?
Yeah. I'm pausing for a reason. I'm trying to. This is a great book if you have a PhD.
I was going to say. You understood it?
Even then, I question some of his.
Has he moved?
I mean, I read this. I mean, you go to the brings to the cottage and going, what the? Right? And you're sitting on the deck going, you're looking for your drink, and it is just not great for anybody.
What's the title?
Oh, it's Wind and Strategy by Walker. He's a soling guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
Big time soling.
Yeah.
I used to race those. So anyway, it's like, I think that's why people would read this going, you know what, I'm just gonna look up the weather on the internet or whatever.
It's nice when he talks about sailing on a particular lake where
That's
you might
right.
be going.
That's right. Now, he's got some local knowledge experience.
Yeah, that's
he talks about Kingston in here a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's a really good book, but we'll talk about other books in a minute. But I think a lot of people have been turned off by that kind of book. There's better books out there, and there's a lot of online courses that are way better than that. But if you really want to see what I'm talking about, if you can buy this, you can probably get this off the internet, eBay. A lot of people are trying to dump this book. So a couple of bucks. The best, actually I tell people when they want to buy meteorology books, wait till the term's over in the United States, because all those kids are dumping $300, $200 textbooks, which are intro books, which are really, really good, for 50 bucks or less, because they just need it for beer money or whatever to get back home. So you watch at the end of the year, all these books go on eBay, and it's amazing what you get for a really cheap price. And most of them have never been opened. No, seriously, you can get a spine crack. And you're going, well, this guy, when you see the price, he paid $200 for this, and you just open the book, and it's like, he's never used it. All right, so let's talk about different types of scales of wind. The global scale is predominantly, when we talk about global scale, we'll talk about weather systems that affect the entire globe. Obviously, that's what we call a globe scale. Jet stream falls in that ballpark, long waves, short waves, all those things that you hear sometimes meteorologists mention, and these patterns affect the entire globe. This is a good idea to get an understanding how weather systems move. If you're an ocean racer, sailor, whatever, this you have to learn a bit more about upper atmospheric patterns and how they affect the ocean. This is important. Then the synoptic scale, now we're getting to scales where you and I, on a sausage course out there, start to make sense. Okay? So we kind of go, well, this is nice to know, that the jet stream's doing this, but I need to know what that sausage course that racing committee guy put out there, how do I know what to do with wind? So we talk about synoptic. Synoptic scale is more like a continental scale, maybe the size of the United States or Canada, where we can start putting weather map stuff on, like lows and highs and fronts, and give you an idea of what's happening with the movement of weather systems. But then when it comes to us, as like either dinghy racers or J24 racers, things that are club-based or regattas that have really tight courses, Alpha Bravo, Charlie courses out there, this is what you have to start paying attention about, mesoscale. Things, forecast patterns, forecast effects, I guess the size of a city we're looking at, scales of cities and the weather that happens around them. And computer models do a really good job with this, fantastic job on this. Pretty good job on this. I mean, they had that tornado outbreak in Ohio Valley 3 days in advance. But you can't tell people in like trailer parks to move, because it always goes for trailer parks, right? So you can't, that's God's way, I guess, of doing things. And you can't tell people to move, but you can tell them to get out of the trailer parks. 3 days, 3.5 days we knew there was a big outbreak in the Ohio Valley. Mesoscale, the models now are starting, and we're going to talk about that, the grid patterns are getting smaller and smaller, okay? And so now we're getting to a scale that we can now model, a small sausage course out there. Something that's 2-3 kilometers, in an area, roughly. The hardest still that we can't get data or reliable data is the microscale. What's this puff of wind going to do along this small tree? That's the scale we're talking, micro. Okay, so I guess if you have your, little leisure up there, it doesn't matter because you're on land, it's in a tree, but this kind of scale, the modeling is not there yet. It may take a long time before we can start to understand this small scale, because it's very turbulent. It's a puff here and a puff there, and so it's really hard for the computer models to catch all those little puffs. But for what we have available to us on the internet, weather data, which is a ton, by the way, these 3 scales here that I guess most sailors can deal with and use to get better information from. You can interrupt with questions if you want. I mean, I got 150 slides here, but I don't know if we'll go all through them. So if you look at scales, once again, we talked about the, synoptic mid-latitude scales. Lows and highs have a lifespan of 3 to 5 days, and they can be as big as 2,000 kilometers across. And then as you go down the scale, tropical storms and tornadoes and hurricanes, and there's that tree with little puffs of wind around it. We're talking 2 meters in seconds. We're not there yet. We start getting better, like around this kind of, actually right about in between there. When this slide was done, we thought we were okay at 20, but now we've zoomed down even further. So now we're in this kind of zone where we can catch stuff within hours or minutes, and within now 4 kilometer resolution. 4 kilometer resolution. I would say 5 years ago, you didn't have that. Okay, so we're getting better and better. The reason why we're getting better and better is the modeling is improving. Computing power is getting faster and faster. I mean, that little alien laptop that I have, I can run a numerical model on that for Southern Ontario for 3 days out, hourly, and it'll run in 22 minutes. The model. Not bad. You have coffee, a couple donuts, and you're done. So the power's, I mean, it's fully loaded computer, but you don't need much to run some of these models. One of the driving forces for all sailing, anybody, aviation, doesn't matter, is one of the things we plot is pressure. Pressure is key for sailors. Remember that. Pressure is important. This is a map of, let's say, we have barometers, and we measure pressure now with all kinds of high-tech barometers, digital. We don't use mercury because mercury kills people. I don't know, when I was a kid, we used to play with it and eat it. Nothing happened, right? Obviously. But now mercury, is that a shot or something? So we don't play with mercury anymore. We use kind of pressure sensors on these things. And every station in North America, there's 2 types. There's the government stations where your tax dollars are working hard to pay for those to work. And there's hundreds of thousands of them throughout Canada and the United States. The density is unbelievable. But also what we're seeing now is the next generation of third-party stations are people that put weather stations at home and on the roof of a yacht club or a marina, and now they're allowed through the wonders of the internet to broadcast or add their data to the other pilot data so you get a tighter resolution of what's happening. One caveat, you got to make sure that these guys installed it correctly, otherwise the data is garbage. And as somebody said, IBM said years ago, garbage in, garbage out. So you have to make sure that they pass the test. But people are doing it. Data is being put forward. What we do with all kinds of barometers, obviously they're all different altitudes, and we measure, the most common is the millibar reading. We have to correct for altitude, otherwise this barometer up here will always measure low pressure, because as you go up, the pressure drops. So no matter where you are, it's always low. So to give these guys better self-esteem, right, because it's no rooms are low, right? You live in Colorado. So what we do is we correct everything to sea level, okay? We have to correct everything to sea level, so we add here and there. And then once we've added all these multiple weather station readings, we start to generate maps. The old days, we used to hand draw them. In fact, good forecasters for a tight meso analysis for a small area for predicting severe weather, or even like guys that are working on things for the America's Cup and stuff, they're doing hand analysis. Okay, computers don't really get everything detailed perfectly, so we generate a map. Why are you spending so much time on this isobar? So here's a typical map. These are barometric readings. They happen every hour. Every hour you can generate a map. Every hour, so you know where the pressure fields are. And then eventually the computer starts drawing the lines. Right? And so where there's lower pressure, like values that are smaller, you put an L. It's not rocket science, it's meteorology. So if it's lower, put an L. Makes sense? Where there's higher pressure, put an H. Right? So we start building this map, because we can't go out there and draw it on, up in the atmosphere with planes and stuff. It's just too messy. So we can do it on the computer real quick, and we can see where all the pressure fields are and what they're doing. The most important thing about pressure, it drives wind. It creates wind, it gets rid of wind, depending where the field is. But the most important thing, remember folks, is the gradient, the delta, the difference from a mound of higher pressure or low pressure and a mound of higher pressure. That's what drives it all. It can happen on a synoptic scale. It can happen on a small mesoscale, believe it or not, we'll talk about that, and even on a microscale. If I had little microbarometers here, with all the heat I'm generating up here, I'm changing the density of the air, there'd be a low pressure surrounding me. So even though I'm creating some wind, not enough, but I could even measure it in this room. But for our purposes, let's stick with the weather map. So, we generated a weather map. We draw all these lines, right? All these lines. What do they tell us? Does everybody know the name of these lines? Not all at once now. Isobars. Iso meaning the same, bar meaning barometric pressure, Latin. We don't teach that anymore. I'm not sure why. Although it'd be neat to see Twitter in Latin. That'd be cool.
That's good.
So these isobars, so the computer or you hand draw it, it's up to you, we draw these lines. And these lines are the gradient, the difference. They measure the difference between one area of high pressure, another area of low, and vice versa, all through North America. What we've realized, because, and we're going to talk about this, high pressure here, the air wants to flow into the valley of low. That flowing is affected by the Earth's rotation, which we'll talk about a bit, and friction and all that, but this air wants to flow here. The more lines you have over a short distance or whatever distance, more lines you have, the greater the gradient, the greater the wind. The less, well, let's say I had a J24 right here in Oklahoma. What's my problem?
No problem.
Might as well be a stone.
Yeah, my problem is J24 in the middle of Oklahoma, right? That's my problem. But look at this. I have to walk from Texas, right near the Mexico border, all the way across Oklahoma, Arkansas, before I get to the next little line, which is the isobar. Would you say that gradient is flat? Yeah, really flat. So the winds here, when it's flat gradient, they're like, there it is, there it is, there it is. 2 knots, 3 knots. Oh, somebody passed wind, there it is. So all these little breezes are all over the place, and they're greatly affected by local topography. But they're like 2 knots, 3 knots. It's nothing to write home about. Today we had 3 knots of wind, big deal, right? So, but when you get the gradient starting to tighten up like this, okay, then we have a much steadier breeze, consistent breeze. So like if I look at this gradient here, I can, just by ballparking it, I know it's, the way air flows is probably out of the northwest or northerly wind as it goes clockwise, counterclockwise around low, like this. But that gradient tells me that wind's ballparking 17, 20 knots, gusting higher, just by looking at that. So I just looked at that. I go, okay, where's the wind today? It's here. It's here, not here, not there either, right? We got some wind here. We have some isobars that are tightening up here, but hole, not bad. Big hole out, look at this. Big hole out here, another hole down here. In fact, let's look at real scenario cases. Here's a weather map. Here's what you get on the internet. There's so many of them. Like everybody, like somebody's dog is making internet maps on weather. It's amazing. So here's an example of Weather Environment Canada. The isobars you can see here, there's H, high pressure, but most of the Great Lakes is pretty flat. So on a day like this, as a racer, okay, what kind of day is it? Is it a gradient day or a non-local puff, local knowledge kind of day? Well, it's the latter is the truth. This is why I'm thinking, boy, I better know all the local effects now, because gradient's not going to save me today. Some days when it's hauling out there, you're going, yeah, I can do this. I can get jiggy with this wind, no problem. But when it's days like this is where the best racers come out of stuff like this, because they're really paying attention to what's happening out there. Here's today. Go ahead.
Isn't there a mathematical correlation between millibars and wind speed?
Yeah, there is. There's an equation that you put the latitude in. I mean, there's actually a spreadsheet too. I don't know if you want it, but there's a spreadsheet where you can type in some of these models and stuff, some of this software that you get on your smartphone or your iPad have these. Somebody found those equations. They can add their latitude into this, and they can figure out the wind speed. There is a correlation, absolutely. Here's today, 2 p.m. today. So I grabbed the weather map, made it black and white. This is a real weather map for today, for Saturday. The stars where you and I are. How many isobars do we go across southern Ontario? Can you count them? 1, 2, 3, almost 4. So when you, on average, when you have about 4 of these lines going through southern, or 4 or 5 going through southern Ontario, like this, you're guessing winds are probably going to be 20 knots and up. Without even, like, am I doing any science here? No. This is empirical knowledge, experience. You guys will sit there, you'll go, one day you'll, you're eating something going, let me see that weather map. And all you do is look at the gradient and go, yeah, I'm fine. I know what to do. And some people are good at that. You gotta learn a bit, but some people know to look at a map and say, we're fine. Number 1, we're doing this, we're reefing, we need some more rail meat, the whole 9 yards. They know exactly what to do, right? And so, and these maps are every 6 hours. 6 hours from now, tell me about the gradient. Is it tight? It's still going to be hauling. Like, it's still going to be, so 6 hours from now, even though the gradient, okay, see, actually it's gotten tighter, hasn't it? So it's really going to start picking up. Just by 2 o'clock, it should be howling out there by after 2. And if I keep going, I can do this every 6 hours, but eventually, by 8 a.m. Sunday, the gradient shows some sign of weakening, and so less pressure there, and we're going to get, the wind's going to start breaking up a bit, and eventually look at the high pressure moves in, and look at high pressure is always famous for it to spread the isobars apart like this, but also slacken the gradient. So you can see this will
the lake effect snow that we're going to be getting this afternoon.
Yeah, you're going to have some of the bands. You're going to have some of the bands come through.
Northwest winds there.
Yeah.
Lake Huron's going to be brutal.
So they're going to have squalls. Actually, the biggest squall is going to be
Sarnia.
right through
Guys
there.
going home to Sarnia.
Yeah.
Going to have a tough drive.
And the models now, when you do these mesoscale models, 4 kilometer, you can actually see the bands evolve, and every hour how they oscillate and move and how they switch. That's how good we're getting. And it verifies really well. So here's an example where the gradient is, if I was out here, it's still honking day out here. Honking. But then if I kind of walk across here, it flattens out completely.
Ron, is the wind 90 degrees to the isobars?
No, they're usually parallel, in between.
Oh, in between,
In a perfect world, they would be in the ocean. If this was ocean, if I was over the ocean, the isobars would be pretty close, covering or following the contour of the isobars. What angles or changes them certain ways is the friction. And we're going to talk about that. Friction's a big one for you guys. Because stuff coming off land, comes off this way, and then all of a sudden the wind has to go, wait a minute, there's no more friction, and it corrects. And you guys are out there, what happened? I'm like 90 degrees. What's going on, right? So the big picture, folks. Pressure gradient force, we're going to talk about Coriolis, just to give you an idea what the Earth does to wind. And then this is another one, big one, folks, friction. This throws off a lot of sailors, especially when they get close inland, and they see the shadow, and they're going, why is it really calm out there? Let's take a look. Let's get closer, right? Keep going, we're getting closer, right? The simple forces out there are pressure gradient force, PGF. Basically what I said, high pressure. If I have a high pressure dome, I had a ball bearing, and I put it out here, and I let it go from the hill area to the valley where the L is, it's going to roll in there. Simple physics, not rocket science. Oh, by the way, I'm going to make this available for everybody. Did I say that yet? No, that's a shame. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this available so you can, I'll make it a PDF so you can load it onto your devices. And you can read stuff. And you can have, didn't that guy Ron talk about this stuff? Now I know what it is, sort of. So pressure gradient force is pretty simple. This will always happen. On our planet, it will always work this way.
Okay, so I got a question. You said the wind goes parallel, yet here I'm seeing it go 90
Yes.
degrees.
Yes, you're right. In a world, you're right. It flows this way. In a world where the Earth doesn't rotate, in the world where it's a perfectly like a billiard ball, smooth as molasses. This would be your world. Yeah, your world would be this. So let's say this was Toronto. Let's say this is the North Shore of Lake Ontario, and this is the lake. You know, there was always high pressure down here and low pressure. Every day of your life, we didn't rotate. Beam reach, beam reach, beam reach. Every day, the race committee guys would sit there going, "How do you want to set up this course? What, you kidding me? We don't rotate. It's smooth out here. Just leave them there. Leave them. Let the moss and the, just leave them out there. The marks. Nothing changes. This is the perfect world, which never will happen." So now, why did Ron say it goes around the isobars? We start looking at things like this. Because as the Earth rotates, things are deflected. Coriolis, French physicist, kind of discovered this force, and there's a deflection to air particles moving because underneath, your frame of reference is always changing as well. So you got this fluid of gas above it, spinning around, and then you got the Earth rotating underneath it. So we've got this right, like it turns to the right northern hemisphere, left in the southern hemisphere, stronger winds usually are deflected, but you see the curve around the isobars. So we know there's no Coriolis effect, believe it or not, near the pole or the equator. The doldrums down here, those guys used to, big square riggers used to be going, how come we're not going anywhere? We've got all these horses here, what are we going to do with these horses? They're dying, right? So they get stuck here and there's no deflection and they'd be in a lot of trouble down here. But where you and I live, right here, folks, it's the middle latitudes. It's a crazy time for weather up there. This is where it all happens, right here. So that apparent force Coriolis discovered, the rotation of the Earth deflects the wind. That's one thing. So this is what happens. This is the Coriolis force. As an air particle moves, there's the pressure gradient force. Remember? Higher pressure, low pressure. So the air wants to do this. But as the air pressure is doing this, right? The Coriolis grabs that force, that rotation of the Earth, grabs it and starts turning it like this towards the isobars, towards the lines, until it's in balance. Once it's in balance, particle goes. I can handle this. This is easy, right? As soon as that one or the other changes, then you're in trouble. And it does. There's another force we'll talk about. So in a perfect world, with no friction and just Coriolis, everything would follow the lines. It's better, not perfect, but better. But it gets worse. You thought this was going to be easy, eh, guys? Look at this. So this is the perfect world. So because I don't want to get into all the mathematics and all the stuff today, but high pressure, air is sinking. The air sinks in high pressure. And it spirals because the Coriolis force and the pressure gradient force, it spirals clockwise, downward, squashing the air, and then spreading out. That's what every high pressure cell does. Pushes the air down and spreads it out. Okay? Sinking air does two things. It gives you no weather, or nice weather, like most people would say, well, it's sunny and it's fair. Usually it's high pressure, air is sinking. But it also does another thing to the wind. What does it do to the wind? When air is squeezing down, pushing out, it slackens the gradient, and then you're out there going, oh, now what do I do? Right? So this high pressure, clockwise, always, air sinking down, but all the leftover air starts spiraling back towards here. The gradient drops rapidly here, but now the forces, both Coriolis and the gradient force, turns the air, literally turns it the other way, counterclockwise, towards, spins up towards the center, and then lifts. Every low pressure area, the air goes into it and then lifts. Once it lifts, it creates weather. Once we have air moving vertically, we get weather. If the air always sunk, it'd be no weather. Boring. But if now we have these two, and every day of this planet's life, as long as we're still on it, I don't know how far out, this battle, this imbalance will always, always exist. So this will go on till we're on this planet or till we're gone.
So is it north hemispheres? Or
Sorry?
Is it clockwise on north hemispheres?
It's yes, clockwise in the northern hemisphere, and the southern hemisphere, it's reversed. Both systems are reversed. But we're talking about northern hemisphere right now. Here's a little test. Let's say in this world of ours, here's the isobars. You know, I gotta get better in the drawing. It's really looking like a 2-year-old that did it. Okay, so you got isobars, you got the airflow, you got low pressure, you got high pressure, and this is spiraling clockwise, and it's going here. Let's see if people are paying attention. As soon, okay, what's the wind gonna look like here? Tell me what the gradient's doing as it leaves here to here. What's the gradient doing? It's getting slacker, getting tighter, getting whatever.
Bottom slacker.
Yeah, so it gets really slack, right? There's some widening here and here too, but this is where it really widens. What now? Remember Coriolis balancing, it's going, all of a sudden, that tight gradient, and then, what's my instinct? If the pressure drops, I'm a particle going across of air. The pressure drops. What's my instinct? To lean towards the higher pressure or the lower pressure? The lower. Because gravity, right? Controlled by, air is moving, down the hill. So as soon as I go, oh, that was so tight, and then I do this, my instinct will be turned towards the lower pressure. Look at this. I don't make the, you think I make this up, you go online, you'll see what I'm talking about. Look at this. This is the natural tendency for the air. After it leaves a very kind of fast-flowing to slow-flowing area, it will tilt towards low pressure. So if you're sailing along here, right here, and the gradient slackens, the wind will shift a bit because of the change in gradient spacing. Stuff like this happens all the time out there on a micro or meso level. That's why you're sitting there, why is it all funneled over there? What's going on over there? And then after you get up there and then there's a change in topography or something, and the gradient, even on the small 20 by 20 kilometer scale out here, it does this and the wind just drops. It's because of this effect. Everything is ruled by these little lines. Remember, if you take anything away from this today, this is what I want you to remember. That the isobars are king. And catch is king. Isobars are king when it comes to wind. Friction. Now we get into the friction stuff. So in a perfect world, the Coriolis effect, would balance out, right? The air, there's a pressure gradient force and everything's happy going around. But then we have the ground. The oceans provide a number of units of friction. The land even worse. Mountains even worser, right? So look at this. As soon as an air particle is subjected to a bit of friction, then once again, it's okay. I was going to do something, but let's say I'm a particle, I'm flowing through there, and then I get tugged by friction. Friction slows me down. I'm slowing down. Once again, what's my natural instinct? To turn towards high pressure or low pressure? So if you're pulling on me because there's friction, I'm slowing down, then I will swing a bit towards low pressure. And that's why the isobars, folks. That's why the winds slightly cross the isobar depending on the friction of the surface. Over the ocean, it's as small as 5 to 8 degrees. So that they're really close, really parallel. But over land, they can be as much as 40 degrees. If it's really rough surface, 40 degrees difference, just by friction alone. And your resultant wind is this. This is the real wind. This is the theory, the Coriolis, friction. When you add up all these things that are battling at that wind, the final result is this vector here, which is slightly crosses the isobar and always points towards low pressure, right?
So what creates high friction?
I would say the worst friction for wind effects would be a mountainous, rough surface. So anything that's rolling hills or open, open crevices, mountains peeking through something, just even a few thousand meters up, will cause quite a bit of friction. Believe it or not, a farmer's field that's really rough with corn or something, that also creates friction, a little bit of friction. And there will be a change always. We're going to get to that. There will be a change always when air is going over land, over water. That switch, that interface right out here, the interface right out here. As soon as it leaves, within a kilometer of the shoreline, there's a correction. Even out here. So buildings, trees, all that. Like City of Toronto is one big friction thing. It's like 300 grit sandpaper. Anybody uses sandpaper. So it's really gritty. Yes?
So does it correct and then straighten back out eventually?
No, it corrects, once it corrects over to a surface with less friction,
Yeah.
it holds on to that. And when something dramatic changes, it gets rough again, then it shifts back. But once it goes over water, for us in this case, once it leaves this very turbulent city, this really rough concrete, glass tower, ugly building city, condos everywhere, once it leaves that out there, it'll take about a kilometer and then it'll even out. That friction force is gone, the water's kind of smooth and the air's going, that's cool, right? And then it keeps going until another force.
So it would go back to parallel to the...
Yeah, very close, they'll correct very close to the parallel, yes.
So would waves, the height of waves affect the friction?
Yeah, they would, yes. We're talking big ones,
Yeah.
Graham. We're talking some 20 feet and up. So the first few hundred feet, maybe even 500 feet of the air sitting on top of those rocky waves over the ocean, it's all over the place. It's friction, it's all over the place.
What about the water temperature? If you hit a puddle and then you got a deep water, so the water heat is different, so would it affect your local pressure?
Yeah, it does. Water temperature is very critical for rising air and sinking air. The warmer the water, you get air that's heated slightly above it and gives it some lift. Colder water sinks it. That also has a small, but yes, decent effect, especially if the air starts rising. It's really unstable. It starts to rise, then it also bends. You're going to see that in cumulus clouds when we talk about them because they're built, the thermals are built, cumulus are built on thermals, but the thermal wind that goes up to support the cumulus also affect the local wind. And you'll see that a lot, shoreline breezes. Did I get everybody? Do I have enough time? I'm looking at this. All right, so here's an example. This is typical. This is textbook. This is the Bible. 8 to 10 degrees wind over water from the isobar. There's that much change, 8 to 10. Over land, look at that, 15 to 40 degrees on land. So you have the same isobars over here, one here, but the result is greater friction on land than it is over the water. Transition from here to here can be dramatic, and we're going to talk about that in some of our cases I'll look at. All right, we talked about this, small turbulent eddies. This is one of the effects. So this is what happens. When air is blowing from land, the green stuff, across to the water stuff here, this is the shift. In the northern hemisphere, when this comes off here, this shift to, I guess the shift is what, to the right? Yeah, to the right, looking down like this. This is guaranteed. This was Vegas, and they had a game like this. You'd say, oh, how many things? You put all the chips on this, and the house will lose. This is physics. This is applied physics. Not done saying gambling's good, but this is applied physics, and no matter what, this transition of the wind, this is where it's originally at. This is where it ends up, and this happens within roughly a kilometer from the shoreline. I could have an example here. Yeah, we know that. See? Look. So you have to start thinking as the pin, let's say somebody put the pin out there, really close to the shoreline. Happens, true or false? Yes. So the pin's there, and you have some hilly area, something going on here, really rough. The wind's coming northerly here, like This is north, south, east, west. Look at this. You're out here sailing to the pin, you're going to have to correct. See how you have to correct for this? You're going to have to bear off and correct to get to around this pin. See that? Because look, this is what you're used to getting, this is what you're going to get within that shoreline. This stuff is gold. Jerry, it's gold. Well, seriously, this is important to know. Because this happened. I used to hear this all the time for junior sailors. The wind changed near the shoreline. Really? It changed? Right? And because they did kids, you know they are. It's like, you know, I don't care. Let's go out. So this effect happens all the time. It's guaranteed. Okay, there's an example of that. I just talked. Look at it. Here's an example out here. This happens right out here. Where? Maybe Scarborough Bluffs. Wind coming onshore like this. Good southwesterly flow, strong, will be thrown up over the bluffs, but some of it gets trapped underneath will make it turn like this. So yeah, you're sailing, let's say downwind or whatever, going like this. You got your spinnaker up, and all of a sudden you get there, and you go what? That's almost what? 45-degree shift? Boom. And you have to now go this way, do a quick change here, or it depends what side you're coming here. There you go. You have to make a quick change here, because that's what the wind's doing within that zone. Has anybody ever sailed out there within a kilometer of the bluffs? Nobody? It's crazy town out there. Because it's like, this area can become very confused, not only in seas, but also in wind. Okay? Like most people I say, like, you know, don't put the pin there, put it out here. Try to get away from this local effect. That's local knowledge right there. But nobody listens to me, never. Okay, types of shift that we always worry about is persisting, oscillating kind of shifts. Winds are always changing, even in a steady flow, even when the gradient's tight, it's oscillating, it's never perfect, you know, it's because nature's always trying to correct itself, you know, get to that perfect state, which it will never achieve nirvana, but it tries. So this persisting, oscillating, we're used to these kind of terms, right? We've seen these terms, we've talked about these terms. Please give me some feedback, thank you. Persistent shift, as we all know, you know, with time, you know, you don't have to do every 10 minutes. I know some people used to do this. In the old days, used to take records. Does anybody do that anymore? So I'm not the only geek out there doing these little records and all that stuff. Okay, so now you can do it on the thingies. So this persistent shift, what caused it? Movement of weather systems, highs and lows, fronts, local topography, channeling. These are the most probable causes of a persistent shift. The biggest one is the movement of weather systems over time. And they don't have to happen every 10 minutes. They can, but most of them usually on an hourly or 2 hourly, you'll see something going as the weather system moves in. Oscillating, you know, there it is, there it is, there it is. That kind of back and forth, right? Pretty well, it's in a kind of a, I would say in a moderate gradient or even slack gradient, but really drives that is the unstable airflows. Unstable air, rising and falling, will cause pretty well predictable, especially cumulus clouds. They're famous for doing this oscillating phase. They get paid big bucks to do this, right? So, no, seriously. They, cumulus, you'll see, are such, they really mess with you, right? They're out to get you. And so they are famous, especially in cold, northerly, unstable flows over water. You get this back and forth, which can be very tricky. I think people like more persistent than oscillating, or am I just making that up?
Agreed.
Forces that drive, that act on air, the local wind, obviously stable, unstable airs, we'll talk about that. The time of day is also important, inland breezes, and then cumulus cloud. These now we're in the mesoscale. When I talk about this phenomena, we're in the mesoscale phenomena. We're in that 20 by 20, you know, Scarborough from Etobicoke area, right? Kind of, you know, scale. These drive everything locally. Stable and unstable air. We get weather balloons. We do this all the time. I know we've been doing this since the 1800s, but it's cheap and it works. Every day, 8 o'clock at Buffalo, that's the closest one to Toronto, or for this area here. So if I have to do some modeling, I will grab the upper air station in Buffalo, which is 33 nautical miles right across from, right? Look at the chart. Every day they launch these weather balloons. Actually, they're half the size now. They're the size of this. Okay. These are weather, we call these radio sounds, and they're portable weather stations. They measure temperature, humidity, the whole 9 yards, wind, everything, everything, right? So we used to put a big honking parachute. Now, something this small made of styrofoam and some electronics, if this falls on somebody's head, it won't kill them. Maybe bruise them, but it won't kill them. This one could kill you, right? That's why you put a parachute. But most of these end up where, do you think? Yeah, on some farmer's field, and they grind it up, or in the ocean. Like if you go in the ocean, there's probably tons of these things on the bottom. So they only use once. Not that we're polluting. But the styrofoam, and that eventually breaks down, right? Eventually. But this is the package here is a lot less plastic, and electronics are a little board like this. It's amazing. Like a full weather station is like that, transmitting GPS coordinates the whole 9 yards on a 9-volt battery.
How much money are they throwing?
This, bless you. This thing here goes for about $57 wholesale. So the government, like Environment Canada, the National Weather Service goes, what's your best deal on these things? And you know, they're meeting in their corner somewhere. I can give you like 3,000 of these at $100 each or something. But if you buy bulk for the entire year, I'll only charge you 57. You can buy one of these. If you really wanted to buy one, I don't know what you know to do with it, but if you really wanted to buy one of these, because you need the receiving system, which is $100,000, right? So it's like, they'll get the tire, or they'll get the car, right? So Lamborghini, just the tire, right? So so this is, yeah, most people say Lamborghini, of course. This one here, you can buy them for about $100. I have tons of them at home. I used to collect them for laughs. Because I would see the generational change when they were really big to now they're like a pocket-sized thing. But they launch these every day, folks. They collect vertical profile of the atmosphere. From that data, we can figure out inversions, which I'll talk about. We can use that, enter that data into a numerical model, do computations. This gives us the 3D part of the atmosphere. This thing, because it's all they'll launch them all over the world at the same time. So we get a 3D picture of what the atmosphere is doing. And what we're trying to measure is temperature change. We're trying to see, as this balloon goes up, if the air is 31 degrees and it gets up to here, air cools as you go up, does it remain warmer than the surrounding air here? If it remains warmer, then the air will continue to go up. As long as this air is that's lifting from the ground, the thermal, is warmer, it will continue to rise. That means if you send this much air up this way, you've got to send X amount of air downward. There's no hole. Like when air rises, like in a campfire, the air is rising, you don't want to, I can't breathe. No, air is replacing it. There's no vacuum. So you get air transport, air is moving up and down. So you're getting air moving up. So we have to figure out if it's unstable, stable, or neutral. Stable air is where it goes up. Oh my God, I'm not doing anything. Actually, I'm colder than the air, so I don't lift, and air doesn't move. And if air doesn't move, guess what happens? Keep going. You have the kids blowing on the sails, thinking that their breath will move them forward, but it doesn't happen. So we want to know if it's stable or unstable. The weather balloons tell us that. Okay, so unstable air does this, folks. I don't care if the grading wind is moderate, that's fine. Air does this mixing. And when you get this mixing, you get puffs. Gust, shift. Gust, shift. The oscillating breeze is famous in an unstable environment. So you can get this information on the internet, I'll show you in a minute, to find out if the air is stable or unstable over your area. And if you know there's cumulus, you can see cumulus, then you can see if there's cumulus field over the water, then you can say to yourself, shift, shift. What kind of day it's going to be? okay, the gradient's like this, but I see a lot of cumulus, so the air is going to do this a bit. Puff and gusty and do this kind of oscillating. Just by looking at the clouds. So this is very simple. When the air is stable, we're not doing nothing. Nothing is mixing. Nothing in the lower atmosphere is going up and down. Even if the gradient was somewhat there, especially if the gradient is this wide and it's a stable environment, it's like the Lake Ontario 300 of this year. People that were on that race know what I'm talking about. They yelled at me for a while, but we got thick skins. Here's an example of stable. Do I need the internet sometimes to tell me if it's stable? No. I can look at, this is somebody's burning something there. This could be the smoke plume in Toronto, one of the many buildings that we have. You can't miss that. And when the air kind of just stable, especially in the morning, you have this kind of long, spread out smoke plume that doesn't mix up here. It stays all near the ground, or just a few hundred feet off the ground, visible wise. This is a stable atmosphere. Good luck setting the pins up there. I don't have to go on the internet. So what are you looking at, Ron? See the McDonald's over there? See the things going up and straightening out? Let's go. Why bother going up? Flat. The profiles of the radio sound that I talked about, that instrument, it gives you a profile. You can get this live on the internet. I have links that keep you busy for years. This profile, whenever it goes, like it's supposed to decrease temperature with height. That's nature. Sometimes it doesn't. Actually, temperature is decreasing, and then it all of a sudden increases just by 3 to 4 degrees, not much. You get a cap. We call it the inversion. This air, because this air is warmer over this air, it's capped. The air is capped, it's not going anywhere. Okay. We call this a temperature nose. Actually, yeah, that's what the profiles look like. That's what, when you go to Buffalo and you get the profiles in another program called BuffKit, that you can actually see this hourly if there's an inversion. We call that a temperature nose. See that? It increases. See, it's usually supposed to be going this way, but it's supposed to, with height, it's going the opposite direction. That's an inversion. Don't all the lines screw you up. And that's what we call a temperature nose. See? That fits perfectly.
So what's the significance of an inversion?
Significance for sailors,
Yeah.
flat, calm, no mixing. If the inversion is only like, let's say 1,000 feet up, the inversion, the air will only move just in that shallow layer, up and down, sideways, and you get nothing. 2 knots, 3 knots, it's all over the place. That inversion, as long as it's there, you don't go anywhere. Most inversions, typical, run-of-the-mill, average ones, break around 10:30, 11 o'clock in the summer day, or especially around here, the climatology. After that, you got 12:30. It doesn't break then, you wait until about 12:30, 1 o'clock. If it doesn't break then, your last shot is about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, maximum solar heating. If the inversion doesn't break by then, guess what? It's not going to break at all. Anything greater than 6 degrees difference. Here, you can get this on the internet, it's all in tabular format. Anything here to there is 6 degrees difference, it will not break, or be very hard to break. So if you look at that, you're going, and you look at the buff profiles, which does an hourly profile of the inversion, and you go to 6 o'clock and nothing happens, you're going to have a tough day out there. Yes?
What would cause it to not break?
As long, well, a couple of reasons. First, there's probably strong high pressure above it, pressing down, and when this inversion gets squished down, the air heats up, it presses against a cooler layer underneath there, it stays in put. Also, the water or land underneath the inversion, especially in the early spring and summer, is colder, so it cools the first 100 to 300 feet or meter air, and that, as long as that stays cold, because it's new in the season, that warm air will stay in place. So there's a kind of dynamical effect, and there's just radiational cooling, land and water being colder. You'll see most of the inversions for us in what time of year? Spring, early summer. Until late summer, when the water heats up and the land's heating up, There's still some mornings where there's an inversion, but in the springtime, it locks in for many hours. The program buff kit, I can talk about this. It gives you hourly profiles. Is that an inversion? Okay, right, that's your dew point. We don't care about that for now. But this is your inversion, so it's 216 degrees of wind at 6 knots. So you go every hour, and eventually, what time was this? 7 o'clock, December 21st. So this is an inversion. That means the air here will not mix. But I wait until that line straightens up. There. The hour that line straightens up like this, the inversion will break. So the predicted forecast is this straightens up, whoosh, look, 15 knots all of a sudden, that big whoosh. That's what you hear in the morning when you're out with the kids, you're training them, 10:30 out there. Did you get your life jackets yet? No. So they're all doing that stuff, and they're killing all that time in the morning. You're doing that when you're teaching theory. Because by 10:30, typical early summer, in June and stuff, that air will fill in around 10:30, 11 o'clock, right? That big whoosh, the inversion is broken. Now the air will mix. In this case, the air will start mixing after 3 p.m. predicted. This is a free tool that can help people like you guys educate yourselves, but also other sailors, how to use these tools effectively. It's all free. The best word ever for sailors.
Sorry, can you explain again that line? What are the axes?
Sorry, I'll go back. Okay, the axis, this is height, this is pressure field, this is pressure level as you go up in the atmosphere. This line here from the surface is that weather balloon being launched and capturing temperature. Okay, so that's the actual temperature as the balloon goes up in height. We can see it started at -5 when it was let go, but as it went up in the atmosphere, this is like maybe 300 meters, 200 meters. As it went up, the temperature up here is actually what? It's above 0 degrees. So the ground was -5 where it was released, but up here, it's actually 0 degrees. The delta is what? 5. And what did I say about 5-degree inversions? Pretty tough to break. You need a lot of heating, remember? And what time did it eventually break? Is anybody paying attention here? There, 3 o'clock. It went from 7 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon when it finally went whoosh. Because the temperature now, look.
It's even.
The predicted one is right up. So as air goes up, it's getting colder, it will start to rise. This air will now start to do this. Upper atmosphere will start to mix.
Is this in any way, I know you're going to talk about later, related to thermals? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we're always waiting for thermals at Kingston.
Yeah,
thermals.
you're waiting. The thermals are based, first of all, how much heat the land's going through. But the land can't push that air up until, if there's an inversion, it's broken. It can start bubbling away at the inversion, but it's got to really start to heat up, and the inversion's got to erode. As soon as it breaks, whoosh, that big whoosh that you always hear in the morning is the sign of the inversion dying, breaking apart, and the air 5,000 feet, 2,000 feet, finally mixing down. All right, daily cycle of wind. When it's high pressure like this, flat gradient, because now we know what the gradient, it's all about the gradient, everything's about the gradient. If the gradient is weak like this, air will respond to the thermals, and the heating will all respond to the daily cycle of heating. The sun comes up, the land gets warm, and the thermals build. If there's no inversion or finally breaks, you get all that mixing. A typical slack gradient days like this. Sun rises, maybe there was an inversion here, it breaks, and then the wind picks up, and then the sun sets, and it drops off. This happens, it's predictable at cottage country, under flat, it's small lakes especially, you notice it, right? My lake, it's honking and crazy up there at the cottage, and then as soon as that sun sets, it's gone for the day, the wind just dies out, right? And you get the loons, right? It's dead calm, thermally driven, flat gradient. If I stick a couple of isobars over my lake, jammed up, forget it. That gradient will rule the weather, not this. This will rule it when the gradient is slack. And you know what, I've done this before with certain regattas that I do briefings for many years now. I look at the pattern, I kind of look at the daily pattern of the wind, and I know the gradient hasn't changed, then I superimpose what I saw, and I know the weather patterns are, like, nothing really moves, everything's static, so nothing changes for the next day. So I look at the wind pattern in certain buoys and weather stations, I overlay that pattern over my prediction, my predicted forecast, I just correct, and you know what? It's within the lines. Like it follows the lines really closely. And what did I do? I took previous day knowledge and I applied it to first forecast because nothing's changed. High pressure's still in place, the gradient still hasn't changed, the sun's going to come up, boom, this pattern exists. Kind of cool, actually. It does, it's a cheat, but it works. Topography's the big one. I think I'm running out of time here, but I can keep going here. Gradient wind, if you have the gradient wind this way, we've got, once again, the effects of shoreline, rougher surface, smoother surface. This air, coming here, it slows down, it, bunches up along the shoreline. This gets here, it bunches up because it slows down. Once these two things, this speeds up a bit and curves, this one curves. Like as this changes, the air bunches up along the shoreline. So when air is going in this direction, like parallel to the shoreline, like this, it tends to bunch up along the shoreline and give you a bit of a maxima under this kind of flow. It's kind of cool because it actually works. But we've noticed that with easterly winds pretty well on the Great Lakes because of the physics of the Coriolis and the friction. Easterly winds really bunch up the wind and really speed it up within a kilometer or two of the shoreline. But you've noticed also this. Westerly winds, or northwesterly winds, because of the friction change, actually the isobars spread apart like this, along or near the shoreline. Guess what happens to the wind? The wind spreads apart like this. We call it a divergent flow. And guess what happens to the wind? It's like taking two isobars, each of those winds, and spreading them out. What's going to happen to the wind near the shoreline? Yeah, it's going to fall apart. So this local effect is, all these local effects are important. There is a book. People still read books, I don't know, but excellent book. We'll talk about that in a minute. This little book here, Great Lakes, there's a new one. Actually, that's what I need to do. You can get this free from Environment Canada. Remember that I used to sell these at the Nautical Mine? This is an old one. I have about 70 at work, and I gave these to the cops last week, training them. They're coxswains for the rescue boat. And Jeff Colson is a meteorologist that I know really well. We used to work together. He has got boxes of stuff. This is your tax dollars working hard. They printed, there's two versions, a PDF version of this, which I have to figure out where the link is because we kind of hide it in Environment Canada, or the hard copy like this. And these are free.
Is that the new one?
That's the new one. No, I have the new one. I forgot it. So what I need to do is remind me, somebody remind me that I need the address. Maybe Glenn give me an address, and I can get Environment Canada to ship you, like, I don't know, how many boxes do you need? They got tons. They got a warehouse of these boxes, of this stuff, sitting there going, all it's doing is off-gassing right now with all the chemicals. That's all it's doing. So I get all these boxes delivered, and I give them out. Like tonight, I'm talking to Oakville Yacht Squadron, right? Talking about weather again. And I'm going to be, I have some of them for them to dish out, but I don't think I have enough for you guys. So I'll need an address, and then I can get Colson to send you whatever you need, free, no charge. Tax money. Okay, that's a good idea. And why do I praise this? Graham, the new one, I don't know if you've seen it, but what do people like about this guy? Have home people seen this guy before?
It's in English.
There's a French one too. There's a French one too. They had, that's what I took for pardon?
Plain language.
It's not in Stewart.
What?
It's not in Stewart.
No. But look, what does this have versus other textbooks?
Local conditions.
Dankeschön. Local knowledge is captured as much.
Very local knowledge.
Yes, very local effects of all these Great Lakes sailors over the years going. Like this one here with the freighter. Watch out for freighters. You know what I mean? Like, so that's all the effects of wind, wave effects, the way it comes up, where it collides. All these have been captured. The new one too was new information. So in the old days, I think there is online a way for sailors to report even additional information so they can add to the next guy. But it's free, folks. The nautical mine used to sell these for what, 20 bucks? They were sitting there going, get the government, get those free publications, right? And they would like 20 bucks. And they were hard to find. Now they've got boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff sitting in a warehouse at Environment Canada doing nothing, just off-gassing. So if you can get this book, and I'll give you the contact, you know, say, yeah, I was talking to Ron on the weekend, and he said you had like thousands of these, can I have a couple? So he will send, because they, right now, before, they did give them out to some marinas, but they didn't do a lot. So they just keep saying, you want any more, Ron? And I can't do it all myself, right? I would spend the rest of my life handing out these things.
Which edition are they giving out? That one or the
No,
new
the
one?
brand spanking new.
What's the title of it again? Sorry.
Wind, Weather, and Waves. It's a guide for the Great Lakes Mariner, but I will give you the contact.
Yeah. There's also, there's one for the other, like, all the rest of Canada too.
Yes, yeah, it's right. Thank you, Graham. There's one for the West Coast and the East Coast, correct. They have ones like this as well. So what you can do, can we just agree on something here? Can you call me or email me and I can set you up with Jeff and just say, you know, we're training, this is what you do. We're training high performance racers for the Pan Am game, blah, 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 big it sound, you know. And Jeff's like, oh, because the Environment Canada, they don't have one. So, and let the response. Is this on tape? Here's the Scarborough Bluffs again, but seriously, no, joking aside, he'll ship as many as he can to you guys. Give out to your sailors. Yacht clubs should do the same thing because they don't know anything about it. Here's see, this is what I'm talking about. Big steep hills along Scarborough Bluffs. Look at the effects. One, when the wind's coming off, and you get in this kind of rotor, we call it a rotor. And then after air coming from the water towards, we get this rotor here. So it switches everything around. Once again, within roughly between 0 to 3 kilometers, I would say less, maybe 2 kilometers within the shoreline. This is all the local effects that's talked about in that book. This is a typical, you should kind of ballpark this. So if you know the average height of hills or trees where the wind's coming offshore, this is the rule. 5 times the height of whatever you think it is, that's the worst wind. So you avoid that area. Look, before you get really clear air, look at this, 30 times whatever height before the air kind of, when it leaves land, goes out to open water, it takes that much distance before it kind of goes Coriolis, friction, this, I'm happy. It has to correct 3 ways, but over here it's still correcting. It's putting everything up as it gets through here and then it straightens out. But 30 times the height of your optics on the shore.
So Toronto Harbor will have.
Well, the Toronto Harbor, there's also other, not only that, there's channeling effects, right? Yonge Street, A Street, right? And you have all those, you know, that tunneling, right? So you have all kinds of turbulence in there. Tell me they're not racing in the harbor, are they?
Yes.
One course.
The medal races are scheduled right beside Forest Key.
Oh, God. I told them to put the wind surface in there because they won't watch me.
The medal races.
Where's this guy's now?
Is he there?
I'm silent for a reason.
He knows I'm kidding, right?
Because what's going to rule there?
Fairies.
Not the wind.
Will they suspend the, I mean, I'm curious about this,
At
right?
this stage, right now, like they haven't officially decided a lot of things yet, but the racing will probably be outside. But the medal races are scheduled to be right outside the Pan Am offices at Forest Key.
I think it's the same in there as off of Cork and Kingston for the medal races. I think they might be surprised.
So when you say worst wind here, that means the most unstable, or
Yes.
what do you mean by worst?
Worst wind is the most turbulent, the most, it's all over direction, speeds all over the place, like small. This is an example, where this is very turbulent, so you can't get a good fix on your sails. You're luffing 1 second, and you're like this. This is the worst wind. You got to go off that much distance before things straighten out. buffers start to do a decent job. And we talked about that. I got to move this along because I'm running out of time. Clouds are the pretty big driver here. Cumulus clouds, here's a good example of unstable day. When you have cumulus like this growing, it's unstable. Unstable, unstable, unstable. Air is rising and mixing, creating these cumulus. The cumulus are known to mess up and cause oscillating breezes, give you gusts and lulls and all kinds of things. Here's a good example. When you have a bunch of cumulus, this is like taking the north shore of Lake Ontario, and you see these cumulus, look at that. Isn't that beautiful how they just pop up like that? Actually, what happens here on a micro scale or mesoscale, the pressure actually falls a little bit underneath that cumulus. It actually, there's like a mini low, right, that forms underneath this line of cumulus. And that does something to what, you think? So let's say that's the little thunderstorm that's growing. Here's the shoreline. Man, I gotta get better than drawing. And then here's your shoreline, and here's your little boat, right? Here's the flow of air. Here's those cumulus that are rising, right? Low pressure, right? So the air is kind of going, gradient's okay. It starts seeing this little low pressure area here. What does low do to the wind again? Oh, it bends it. And so your air will shift from a southwesterly, like your westerly, southwesterly flow. It'll start to bend, depending where you are, towards that rising bunch of cumulus. And it will shift, look. It'll be here this way, it'll be this way here, more that way, and then eventually, once you pass this, quite a bit, I think I would say, wow, maybe a kilometer or more, maybe 2 kilometers, then it straightens out. This is like a little dent in that flow because the cumulus are messing it up locally. So it may not affect the big flow in general, like the flow over southern Ontario, but it's enough, these cumulus, to bend the wind like that. Little effects like this you have to pay attention to. On water, this is the problem. Cumulus have a simple donut flow. So what happens here is the air rises towards the center, cools off, and goes down. So where the air is rising under B, what are you doing? The air is going vertical. What are you doing? That's right. Boats, unless we switch them vertically, right? Like unless we take them like this and move them this way, and this is really honking, you'll go this way. But last time I checked, boats need air to go horizontal. So this is where there's wind on the edges, and this is where there's no wind. When you get under a dark cumulus, you just do 2 things. You say, ugh, because you're putting yourself where there's a hole. And sometimes you can get stuck in that hole for, especially in a regatta. If you're there more than 5 minutes, break up the sandwiches. You're not going anywhere. Yes?
What would be the feeling of the real effect? Assuming that there is a sun above there, would that be as soon as you get to the shade of that cloud that you will get the effect, or just when you're...
I think once you start entering the shade, the shadow part, you'll see the wind decrease. Once you get to the part where it's that dark, overcast, how it's light on the edges, and the dark underneath that, visually, once again, I'm not using the internet, I'm using my eyeballs. I know that I put myself or my crew in a hole. Okay? And so we're going to have to take our time. And when it comes to racing, time is some kind of an important variable. And so, especially when you're making good headway or you're losing track. So this is important to know. And actually, you see, this is a good example. Look at this. Here's two lines of cumulus. Lighter null winds here, but you want to position your boat, if you can, to stay on the edges. If there's a whole row of these cumulus, and sometimes you do come in lines, by the way, you would be hanging up. Actually, I do have a slide on that. You do this. Nah, yeah, that's what you do. If there's, and sometimes the cumulus on the water line up like this, you would be hanging on the edges. Not, okay, well, I wouldn't do this. Dum da dum dum dum. Dum da dum. No. You just stay in between where there's open air, because both of these lines of cumulus will have downwash and will give you air. If you hang here, you're not going anywhere, and the same here. And you can see this in the satellite pictures, by the way. Satellite technology is actually come a long way. You can zoom in on Lake Ontario with a visible picture. Like before I go racing, I look at the satellite picture because I look at things that tell me, is there this, is there that, just by looking at the picture. Sometimes I don't have to do all the geeky science stuff. I just look at things going, yeah, it's okay, that's fine, let's go. And that's all I need, right? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Lake breezes. Lake breezes only happen 99% of the time when the gradient is slack. If there's too many isobars, what lake breeze? Forget it, it's not happening. Once you have a slack weather pattern, no inversion, the land heats up, this is what you get. This is the satellite pictures you can get. Actually, this is one they stole from me from Environment Canada. When they were making this new book, I gave them all my slides, and they started taking stuff from my slides, and they took this one from me. This is why I particularly waited on this day to see, this is the effects in the springtime. Water is cold, 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 land heats up, all these cumulus that are popping up, that's what these little round cells are. That's telling me the gradient is slack, and it's telling me that it's a thermally driven day. Just that picture alone. I don't need to know anything else. I look at that picture, I get down to the club, thermal, as soon as that sun sets, I'll worry about it. But between now and that sunset, this area is thermally driven. Just by looking at that picture. Because the cumulus are all rising, remember how it bends the wind? All this onshore breeze, onshore, and you can see the line. Look at that. Where the onshore cooler lake air is moved inland. Look at this. All this Lake Ontario is moved in, also down here, moved in here. Lake Huron air is moved in there. See, so this is your lake breeze. Lake breeze, lake breeze, lake breeze, lake breeze. This will run till the sun sets, yes.
You want to be onshore in those conditions, but is there any way to tell how close to shore, or is it just touchy-feely?
It's touchy, no, it's, every area is, you've got a point there, every area is different, but I would say within the 1 to 3 nautical, I would say 1 to 2 nautical miles of the shoreline is at best condition. Anything beyond 5 kilometers, then you end up with a bit of a hole there. Because if air is moving this way, it's got to go onshore, up the cumulus, cool down, come back down, and sink. And sinking air does what? So, on a micro scale, not only on a synoptic and planetary scale, but also on the Western Lake Ontario scale. Doesn't matter. Physics, works on multiple levels. And but I have to look at this picture, for me, Lake Breeze Day. So the sun sets, that's all going to break apart and the wind's going to die out. That's how I know. I don't have to look at any weather map. This is simply put how it works. Air rising over land, right? Even a 1 to 2 degree temperature difference is enough. But look at what we're sitting against. Have you seen the buildings and the condos? How much heat is that concrete glass? People give up. Look at me, I'm giving up. So I'm giving up tons of calories of heat. Those buildings are full of people heating and cooling. How much heat's being given off? The delta sometimes from the shoreline to the buildings as much as what? 15 degrees we measure. 15 degrees. That's phenomenal. So this rises all, so let's say this is Ontario, Toronto, this rises, cools, this kind of simple circulation where it's sinking out in the out there 5 kilometers beyond in the lake. It's calm, stay away from there. You can't sail there because it's rocky and landy. So there's your area. Steady 8 to 14 knots. That's a typical lake breeze thing. Most lake breezes give you 8 to 14 knots. Standard.
Ron, just a quick question about gradient breeze. So you have a thermal breeze, cumulus cloud pops up. If the gradient is running, I guess, over the land, like so onshore breeze is the gradient,
yes,
would that drive more pressure as opposed to an offshore gradient breeze?
If the pressure is lower over land, the gradient is decreased over land, it will drive it harder over land. That's just the gradient flow.
Right.
If there's lower pressure by like a low pressure area, further to the north, which also drops it, will make the gradient even stronger, which would make the flow, onshore flow, maybe go up to 17 knots. So the lower that pressure can get over land, over that cold water, it will drive the gradient. The gradient delta, and if you have something synoptically or mesoscale over there enhancing the lower pressure-ness of it, will increase the flow.
Yeah, you see the clouds pop up, and sometimes you actually see them come over the water, and sometimes they just never come over the shore.
Oh, the problem, if it's early spring, the reason why, because cumulus are smart, right? They need heat, right? As soon as they go, it's cold, right? And I'm actually, the stupid ones, those cumulus, what they do is when they venture over the water, they are driven by thermals. When there's cold water, is there thermals coming off the water? So this cumulus kind of goes, whoa, 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 and they just die out. A melting that actually happens to cumulus as it goes out. So and you'll see it on satellite pictures. If you play the film, you know, the little clips they have for satellites, the real time, you say put it in motion, you'll see cumulus clouds, the dumb ones, that go over the water actually collapse. Because they haven't figured out, you know, like thermals are keeping me alive, and they'll collapse. That's why thunderstorms in the early spring don't make it near the shoreline. They're over land, and they stay over land, but as soon as they go near that colder water, they collapse and die out. Only till late August, late July, early August, September, when that water finally heats up, thunderstorms and cumulus will survive traversing the Great Lakes. But you need that water to warm up before that happens. Okay, because I've got not too much time left, and I still have quite a bit. When you look at a venue, when you're racing and stuff, you know, keep it simple. I teach people, racers, you know, if you've never been somewhere, Google it. Google Earth it. Figure out if this is your race course. Figure out, you know, what's going on. What are is this mountainous? Is this only like 300 feet, 300 meters up? Is this open and flat? And, you know, what I tell them to look around. And with Google Earth now, what can you do? You can get a horizontal profile, right? You can. Has anybody ever done this? Okay, so what you do, you actually put yourself where the race course would be, and then rotate yourself around. And you can do that with the Control Z control, and you can actually see your surroundings. And when you 3D it, you can see what does the venue have to offer when it comes to stuff on land that's going to affect flows and stuff. I say keep it simple, but that's the simplest, cheapest way of doing it. And so here's an example. Let's say that's a race course. Let's say that's a coordinate there. I know this is open, so this quadrant from here to here, okay, that quadrant is wide open. So I know the air is going to be as is. If it's like southwest here, it'll be southwest there. There'll be no transition, right? Because I'm out here, right? This should be the same air coming across, right? Because the friction, this is wide open water, it's coming across, there's no transition. But the air coming off land, what do I have to worry about? Coming off land, correcting itself, and then going out. So there's a correction with wind in this quadrant going out this way, but there's no correction of air coming this way. So you have to pay attention. So near the shoreline here, I think I have a slide. Yeah, so the air's coming off like this, near the shoreline, and it's going to be turbulent. It's going to be crazy. I have to correct for it. So this is all done in Google Earth. You can measure roughly a kilometer or a nautical mile out or whatever, draw the little dashed line in there. Like Google, last time I checked, Google Earth is free, right? So I can do all this. So, you know, the race committee won't tell you exactly where they are, but they'll say ballpark it 2 miles south of whatever. So this is 2 miles south of whatever, and I try to get an idea what the local effects will be. Simple, really simple and effective. Okay, so wind, we know that the wind speeds up. Okay, we know the wind's going to speed up through here because it's a bit of a cut. This is higher land, so we know this kind of wind flow here. Let's say there's your triangle, they'll speed up here, and we know there'll be stronger wind here. And then after, if you have to overlay hypothetical race course, there, this is what you would do, how you would stay, you know, ride it up here. Just like, see how you're trying to get back. Look what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to and get back to where I know there's stronger air. There's weaker air here. There's weaker air, and this is done in my mind. Like, don't tell me you don't think this way, right? You do, right? You're going, if I know this is the triangle. This is where I'm going to be, If I know I gotta do upwind and all this stuff, I know this is a pocket of strong winds where they put a pin out here. I know it's in the shadow of this with this flow. I'm gonna try to get around here as quick, stay in here as quick as possible, try to get back into this area where I've got stronger air. That's how I think. And I think that's how all of us think. We don't get all fancy little diagrams and draw it out. We do it in our heads. But that's what we think, and that's what you should be thinking at any venue that you go at. And here's a good one. Slack pattern, onshore 5 to 7 breeze. How would I do it? There's the committee's put a triangle out there. And we know there's an offshore flow like this of 5 to 7 knots. Like, this is what you should be thinking. This is the hypotheticals they're going to give you. Well, we know the wind dies out here because there's a little local breeze in this little corner here. So I wouldn't venture out here, would I? Right? So we know there's a triangle. You kind of try to stay as close as you can. This will be risky, but as soon as you're on that pin, you want to head back closer where there is a breeze. We all do this. It's instinctual, right? But it's a different venue, so you should scope it out. Here's a good one. Simple sausage. Not rocket science here. Here's the wind. It's going to be shifting this way during the race. This is telling me there's more wind out here. And you know, there's the wind, so I'm getting a better breeze out here because I know the effects. If I draw a line, there's no real change. But then as air gets caught over here, you get some turbulent eddies, and it's all messed up around here. So where am I going to favor myself hanging around? Here or here? Your instinct should tell you there. Like you should be hanging around here. Don't venture on your return. Don't venture on the dark side. Stay where the windy side is. But we do this, right? Tell me we do this. Yes. This is what you should be using Google Earth for. Put your hypothetical wind speeds, figure out the local climatology, what's going on, and that gives you an insight to what your venue is going to be like. All right, I'm going to move it along here. What I've done also in the past for a lot of big regattas, North American Benetos, the one at RCYC last year, or the other year, I can't remember. They asked me, no, we got sailors from all over the world. Can you give us some advice? Really? I said, sure. I can grab wind speeds for specific time, hourly wind speeds from weather buoys, and tell me they put a weather buoy out there. Did they? Did they put a weather buoy out there right now from Environment Canada? Or does anybody know this? Can somebody find out? Because I think there's a yellow buoy up there for the Pan Ams gathering wind data to calibrate the model.
I think there is.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, there was there last summer.
Okay, so they're using it to calibrate their model output. So they can say, wow, the model's gone crazy because they have actual and then they have fantasy model stuff, right? So what I've done is I've taken weather data hourly for the buoys and I said, what's the wind direction from this time for that regatta, there's September 8th to the 11th, give me the most predominant wind and speeds. And I came up with this. So it's called a wind rose. And we can generate these wind roses anywhere. For that time period, the predominant wind for that race course was easterly. I can generate these wind roses for anything. So I can give you climatological norms, what the wind will be doing a certain time period of the year. Right? Obviously, this is just based on empirical data, but it gives you good insight. So most of the guys that were coming from Europe, I think it was the 8-meter worlds, I can't remember, it was one of those big ones. And so the guys, you had guys from Europe going, tell me about this. And when I got these wind roses, man, their lights just turned on. Because they said, we don't know this stuff, but this guy's giving it away for free. Right? So I started talking about this at the club, at the RCYC, at the clubhouse, and we spent like almost an hour on this because they wanted to understand the local effect, the local wind climatology. You know, I mean, they come all the way with their 8 meters from Europe. You want to get it right. And here's an example. I do this for all the regattas. I do this, I get an idea what the predominant wind speeds are in knots and in direction, so sailors know what's going on. All right, grip data. I'm gonna really move on because I think I just have a few more minutes here, and then we have to break for lunch. Grip data is raw numerical data that now is available all over the internet. There are various tools, free programs that I have a list to keep you busy for forever. To download this data and to get high resolution model data, wind speeds over whatever. And you say, well, computers are often wrong, Ron. Yes, they are. You don't want to put 100% faith in, but we call it guidance, good guidance. But if we had to look at modeling in general, the best thing the model does, the best, is this, wind speed and direction. Out of all the scores, when we look at the scoring, did it do well, did it really suck, whatever, this always does the best. So computer models will always score high in wind direction and speed. So your faith is much higher in this element. Next is temperature, we don't care about that. Humidity, when we get to rainfall and snowfall, this is where it's horrible. The model still, even in 2013 with the high resolution, still has a hard time predicting decent rainfall or snowfall. It's getting better, but out of all parameters, this will always be your best parameter. So the grid basically is tighter. Since I've done this, the grid, all the grid data you can download for North America, even Europe, doesn't matter. Both Canada and the Americans give you the data file for free. And so I'm going to speed this up because I want to get to the questions too. So blah, blah, blah. When it comes to this, the smaller the grids, the better the resolution. And now we're at a point where this, by the way, used to be 100 by 100 resolution, 100 kilometer squares. No. Worldwide, no. We're down to 20 by 20 worldwide. When I was a kid, we were living with this, 100 kilometer resolution. Now by 20. And then locally, for the Great Lakes, for near the shorelines, for North America, we're down to 4 kilometer blocks resolution, which is fantastic. So what we do here is, these are the websites. I have this all undocumented. Like, that's what we're going to have to do, folks. You're going to have to get my documentation that goes with this. So I have a I don't know, 15-page document on all kinds of stuff. And it talks about where to get this grid software free. Because start off for free. There are paid services, but start off for free. Because I want you to learn what grid, and there's a lot of free stuff out there. So there's a page, the website talks about how you use Grib, the cautionary notes, of Grib, don't put everything in it, but learn from it. Like, he will give you the best guidance possible. In fact, all my stuff I still have to go through. Look what I used to do in the old days. I used to take a spreadsheet and I would plot actual data from the buoy near the race course and the forecasted models, and I would figure out the error. And so it gave me an idea of which model was performing the best to go with and which model to dump. Simple spreadsheet, right? Not rocket science here. Meteorology, once again, and I'd say, when you see one little green, red, like the difference between the buoy and the forecast data is 1 knot. This was done during the Canada Summer Games. I was doing this. Okay? How many years ago was that?
09?
Yeah, long time ago. So I was doing this, and I think I was giving it to the racers to teach them to look what the model's doing. Which one has the better performance? Which one has the less errors? And they'd go, oh, I like this one because its performance has been pretty good, so I'm going to stick with it. But look at the errors: 2 knots, 1 knot, 1 knot, all doable for us. Like, if we're off by a knot, does it really matter? Can we make adjustments for a knot or 2? Yeah. If you're off by 10, 15 knots, then you got a problem. But 1 or 2 knots, I think, is for most sailors very manageable to deal with. So this is a simple spreadsheet, but the computer models are getting, look at this. What I can do is, I was just showing some errors there, but can I just, here's an example. Okay, there we go.
Not quite.
Can you see it? Oh. Why did it disconnect?
Let's do this to us before it's
How did it do that? I have a breaker there. Yeah. So here's an example. okay, of this morning's wind field, right? So we can zoom in closer and closer. This is grip data, 1 kilometer resolution, and I can zoom tighter and tighter in this to find out what's going on. So what I can do is then I can take this and go, you know what, show me the weather table. There. Every hour, direction, and speed. So it's telling me, I just picked something nearby, by, I don't know, 11 o'clock, 12 noon, we're going to be up to 25 or 23 knots up there. So you go in prepared. You're ready with your tactics, you're ready with your, you know, all the training you've done, your boat, the whole 9 yards, you know, the rules, your starts, everything, and then you go away with kind of an idea of what kind of day am I going to have up there? Is it going to be a gusty day? Is it going to be building? This a building day? Yeah, it's a building wind day, isn't it? So there's a whole bunch of information that you can do that costs nothing to get a better understanding of what's going to happen out there. And that's what I've been teaching people for years now is grid data was just released no more than 10 years ago. Prior to this, with the old schools, they're like, oh my God, what do I do, right? Now that it's available, and it's freely available, and there's software that's freely available, well, I can put it on this thing. Here's an example. How much time do I have left? I thought so. Here's another, this is kind of cool one actually. For yacht clubs, you can do this, online? Yeah. There. Okay, so this is 11:55. If you had Wi-Fi out there, which most of us can get Wi-Fi or have, you know, internet capability. If this was the club weather station, I can lock in and see what's going on. So all these little weather stations, this is at the cottage. So I'm at the cottage right now, it's 0 degrees, it's 5-kilometer winds northeast. Free app. The station's already here. You just plug into the internet, it downloads the data for you. You know, as long as you have internet, they'll put it on to a server, and anybody can get this anywhere. So if you had a whole bunch of these little weather stations, you can get this in real time. Anyway, but then I go to predict wind. This is a free app, right? I pick my site, and I can look at my, just go like this, and I can see my wind speeds compared to models. So I get actual versus the model data. And I can get a glance. And there's Wind Guru. There's a whole whack of them. The funny thing is, they all pull off the same source, Environment Canada and US. Okay, but each one modeling is different. They truly dynamically downscale the data. Other ones just kind of interpret the data. So I've been using these guys forever, and they verify the best. Because as a meteorologist, it doesn't matter who makes the numbers. If they don't verify, why bother? If they said the wind's going to be 25 knots, and it's actually 10 knots, I need to know that we really blew that forecast. Rarely, when I use these guys, they're off by the greatest I've ever seen, 5.5 knots for an actual course.
And who are they?
Predict wind. There's a whole bunch of them, but these guys have a free app. There's a whole bunch of them that do as well. But I can get maps, you can get all kinds of things on this. Same with your computer, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we've been using wind.
Yeah, predict wind is, I would say, I verified it, and it does a really, really good job.
I think we have some time for questions.
Yeah,
from
because
us,
I really appreciate this, guys. Did you see how much I covered?
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks so much. I know.
So what is the effect of the tide? When we're on the ocean, and there's a tide?
Along the shoreline?
Yeah.
Well, the most obvious is tidal flows. So you get the currents, especially where you are. So you get the, depends how the outline, if the tide's coming in, you're going to get current going in like this. And depending on the time of the regatta or the time you're going out, if you're going, tide's coming in and you're trying to go out, you have to figure ways to go to lesser effect areas where the tide doesn't have that greatest flow in to get around that. And I think most race committees plan it so they're not doing it when there's major in or out. Graham, am I right? You try not to put it in when there's major ebbs and flows, right? I don't know. But
is there an incidence of local wind?
yeah, the local wind can generate a surface current, and I did have a slide on that, I didn't zoom through it. But what you do, if the current is coming down like this, can I use that?
Yeah.
right? So there's your pin, right? And the wind's blowing like this. And so you got this like this, but this kind of land goes in like this. And what you would do, big waves or currents going like this, you would go this way. You would stay on the lesser wind, but you wouldn't be pushed back by the surface current. You would hang on the outside like this, and then tuck in there to go around. So I wouldn't go this way. In the middle of all that surface current, I would hang on the edges. Yes, I'd get a little bit less wind, but I think I would make more ground headway here, and then try to tuck in as quick as I can around the pin. That's what I would do.
My question was more, when the tide is changing between low tide and high tide, can we anticipate the wind shift?
No, not always. No, not always. The tide is its own phenomenon. What the wind can do is either, as the tide goes out, it's the right direction, can enhance it pulling away faster or slowing it down. When I was sailing off the East Coast, yeah, there'd be these small bays where if there was an easterly wind, most people, what I learned from local knowledge, you would ask people, the tide comes in 15 minutes earlier with an east wind at 20 knots. If it's a west wind, you got 5 to 7 minutes before the tide is delayed. That local secondary knowledge, that's tough. Because you get all the primary tidal things across whatever, but the local knowledge of people knowing the effects of wind and tide and the time it changes when it comes in is important. I used to buy people, the sailors in Newfoundland, a bunch of screech, and what they know, it's true. It's amazing what that stuff will do to you. You do that, you sit down with them, and then say, yeah, Ron, when there's a northerly wind, we get this kind of thing, so you want to keep your boat this way. That local knowledge, yes, you have to use some things to get to it, but you get that, it's important to get that. The old fishermen guys, best knowledge I've had, best. Anything else?
Are you going to have all the websites that you use on the PDF that you're sending out for?
Well, I'm going to PDF this. The other one's a Word document, which is hyperlinked. So you just click on the blue hyperlink, and you go to the website. One's a Word document, one's a PDF.
You're going to send both of them?
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
Anything else, folks? I know you guys are probably hungry. Oh, right on the money. Right on the money.